there everyone, thank you for joining us today at Ankyra Publications. Please visit our website at ankyrapublications.com. That's ANKYRA publications.com. We have all sorts of books and materials on fighting pornography and other issues with sexual addictions. Today we are going to be discussing pornography, and I call it the silent killer. Before we begin, I'd like to read a quote, and it says, "People were created to be loved. Things were created to be used. The reason the world is in chaos is because things are being loved and people are being used." And this quote to me really captivates the essence of what we're seeing today with both pornography and human trafficking. Pornography has so many far-reaching negative impacts upon society. We're only going to be able to talk about a few today. I really want to talk about some of the impacts that it has directly upon the user, and then also when that person is consuming the pornography, I want to talk a little bit about how it impacts other people around the user. To start off, I want to show you a video. It's a short clip from Fight the New Drug, and it's called How Porn Affects the Brain. And I just want to make the point that Fight the New Drug is a non-religious, non-legislative, non-profit organization that educates on the harmful effects of pornography using science, facts, and personal accounts. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but I like some of their materials, and I'd like to show you this video and the impacts that pornography has on the brain.
I want to talk to you about this, our brain. It's something that we all have, performing at different capacities, I'm sure, but still, we all have one, and it was given to us for free just for being born, and it's the powerhouse of our bodies. Without it, of course, we just drop dead, because you can't function without it. So it's the most valuable thing that each of us possess. So it's pretty important that we protect it, right? And luckily, we have these things called skulls to help us out. Sometimes we challenge those skulls and do things that kind of hurt our brains, like this. And this. This one's the worst. Oh! I don't even know what he's thinking. And sometimes we just make stupid decisions with those brains, and you know, this guy. Luckily this guy's wearing a helmet, so. But what are some other things that might hurt our brains? Obviously we've got alcohol. We've got drugs, and we've got, you know, big metal balls with spikes on the end of them, but I want to talk about a new drug. The thing is, pornography is not all that new. It's been around since the beginning. So why are we calling it a new drug? Well, that's because scientists are just now, over the last decade, beginning to understand what pornography really does, how it affects our brains, and psychologists are understanding how it affects our behaviors, and sociologists, our society. And so we're just beginning to understand that it can be just as addictive as drugs, as hard drugs. And we'll explain how, because I know that there's some skeptical eyes out there kind of thinking, wait a second, drugs? Really? I don't sniff it, I don't inhale it, I don't inject it. How is pornography like a drug? But first, you're probably wondering, dude, we're teenagers, why are you talking to us? Why are you talking to us about pornography? It's an uncomfortable topic, right? In fact, I bet you anything that as you guys came into this, as you kind of found out what this was going to be all about, you thought to yourself, oh boy, here we go. Shoot, you know, how do I get out of this? I mean, not a lot of people like to talk about it, but it's becoming more and more of an issue, and we got to deal with it. And here's why we're talking to you guys. The largest group of internet porn users is youth, ages 12 to 17, you guys. 90% of the people watching this video right now fit into that group. Do you know what the average age of exposure is for pornography? 11 years old. 11! And 9 out of 10 youth ages 8 to 16 have seen it. So we know what it is. We know what it is. We're not here to define it. Get this. Every second, now, 30,000 people are viewing online pornography. And what was the largest group of internet porn users? 12 to 17, so you see how a lot of those are there. And girls, watching this right now, listen up. A lot of you tune out for topics like this. You can think, okay, it's a guy's issue, it's not my issue. Recent statistics show that 30% of addicts are women. That number has skyrocketed over the last decade, and it's growing. So current research is showing that pornography is a drug, and that it can lead to addiction. But some of you are looking out there going like, well, how? It doesn't make any sense. How? Again, I don't sniff it, I don't smoke it. Well, how? Let me show you. Pornography goes in through the eyes, in through the iris, and triggers a release of chemicals in your brain. Chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, oxytocin. Now this is a science class, but you may have heard of some of those. Now these are natural chemicals that your body produces. These chemicals are needed. When you do drugs, hard drugs, or look at pornographic material, your brain is overloaded with these chemicals. After you keep looking at porn, your brain gets used to those high amounts and builds up a tolerance. Those same images that once gave you a rush don't have the same effect anymore. In order to get that same rush, it not only takes more of it, but it also takes a more hardcore version of it. Your brain becomes dependent on that rush of chemicals and literally rewires itself to think that that's normal, and so you cannot function without it. That is addiction. The same process happens with cocaine and heroin. They can't stop.
Pornography is like any other drug. As people get involved with it, it's very easy to become addicted, and they require harder porn, more novel and devious things. And many times it is a slippery slope, and people begin never thinking they're going to get into these really dark places. But all of a sudden, what we're finding with statistics, with personal accounts and interviews, so many people, that many cases are ending up in very devious places. People going into pedophilia, rape, going to prostitutes. There are many examples. But it is a slippery slope because it's a drug. And I want to give you an example. A story. My friend Sarah, she had a sister. Sarah had a sister, we'll call her Ellen. So Ellen gets married to this guy. So he has an issue with pornography, but she just kind of assumes, okay, it's going to go away. He says it's better. They end up getting married. And so after a few years, it seems they're decent in the marriage. Nothing really seems out of whack. Well, all of a sudden, Ellen contracts a sexually transmitted disease. So this is how everything was discovered. So Ellen's husband had been using pornography. He'd never quit, and it escalated into more devious things to the point where he was visiting prostitutes regularly. And this is how he ended up getting an STD. And of course, when he's having relations with Ellen, he passes the STD to her. Reams of research show that internet pornography is linked to neurological harms, sexual dysfunctions, and increases in rates of sexual violence. This is an epidemic going on right now in society. Because imagine a situation where you have this amazing boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever it would be, and then all of a sudden you discover one day that they are using internet pornography. How would you feel? Most people feel completely compromised. They feel totally betrayed. They feel like they're not good enough, especially as they start to age. They think, I'm getting heavy, I'm getting old, I have wrinkles. People are not feeling comfortable in situations where their significant other is looking to something else for satisfaction and for intimacy. And this is happening, like I said, in epidemic proportions across the globe. And so some women, some men ask, is it a problem? Is this a deal breaker if I have a person that wants to marry me and they're involved in pornography? And I want to give you a story about a girl that I know named Jane. She decided to marry her boyfriend. He had an issue with pornography, but she kind of thought in her mind, it's going to go away. When we get married, it'll be gone. So they get married, and the pornography issue with him gets much, much worse. Such to the point that it's a daily problem in their marriage. They no longer have intimacy. They're no longer spending time together, eating dinner and doing fun things like they did when they were dating. They're no longer having emotional interactions together. They're no longer having intimate connections. Because what starts happening is pornography trains a brain to become polygamous. So when a person is using pornography, they're going from image to image to image, video to video to video, person to person to person. This doesn't stop when someone gets married. It continues. So he had this beautiful bride, Jane, brand new bride, And after he started to have this relationship with her, he was ready for the next thing. And this is what pornography does to the brain. And people want to stop and just have their regular marriage, continue on with life, but it just doesn't happen generally. This is what we're seeing with the patterns. So their relationship ends up collapsing. And after that, Jane is in counseling, she's getting therapy, she is so depressed, she becomes even suicidal, she's on medication, they're constantly talking about divorce. And unfortunately, this is one situation, this is one story, but there are so many situations, there are so many stories that are similar. Sure, there's different names, there's different circumstances and events, but the bottom line is that pornography is ripping apart marriages. It's causing division between husband and wife, and it's just causing so many problems. So this is something that people should consider if they are thinking about marrying somebody. Remember that this is causing polygamy. It is not going to just stop or miraculously go away. Now I'd like to read a few quotes regarding how pornography affects relationships. So according to National Coalition for the Protection of Children and Families, 2010, 47% of families in the United States reported that pornography is a problem in their home. I'd like to stop there for just a moment. This is a statistic from 2010. Every year we're seeing an enormous spike and increase in pornography consumption. So now it's almost a decade later, we know that this statistic is much higher than what we're seeing here. And also, yes, this is a statistic from the United States, but we're seeing these same sorts of statistics worldwide. So if you're in Asia, if you're in Europe, if you're wherever you are, these are going to be similar in your region. Next, pornography use increases the marital infidelity rate by more than 300%. 40% of sex addicts lose their spouses, 58% suffer considerable financial losses, and about a third lose their jobs. 68% of divorce cases involved one party meeting someone new over the internet, while 56% involve one party having an obsessive interest in pornographic websites. In the past, there are all sorts of reasons why people were having or struggling with their relationships, their marriages. There were things like communication issues, financial issues, in-laws, even maybe substance abuse. All of these things put pressure on marriages. So these were some of the top reasons why people were having problems. But now what we're finding, the number one reason for breakups, annulments, and divorce is actually pornography. So not only are we dealing with all of those issues from the past, but now as a result of internet pornography just exploding into society, it is causing so much destruction to marriages. So a lot of people ask, how do I know if I have a sexual addiction? How do I know if I'm addicted to pornography? And really, if someone is unable to quit a sexually impure act like pornography or masturbation, then we know there is a problem. We know that an addiction exists, and we know that something needs to be done. And as we discussed earlier, pornography is something that affects people's brains. It's like a drug, and it changes the chemistry of brains. It also significantly increases the chance for cheating and affairs. And so if you are in a relationship with someone and they're involved with pornography, you really shouldn't be okay with it. It's going to destroy you, your significant other, and the relationship. There is an undeniable connection between pornography consumption and human trafficking. So what is human trafficking, you may ask? Human trafficking is the exploitation of individuals, and it happens in a variety of different ways. But primarily what we see with trafficking is the forcing of victims into prostitution, subjecting victims to slavery or involuntary servitude, and forcing victims to commit sex acts for the purpose of creating pornography. And there are, of course, other ways that people are trafficked, but these really are the primary ways. There are roughly 40 million traffic victims in the world today. Some studies show 80% of traffic victims are sexually exploited, and 49% of persons sold for sex are put into pornographic materials. This is shocking information. Consequently, an enormous portion of the porn created now involves trafficked victims, and it's literally impossible for people to know when they're watching porn if they're viewing a trafficked victim or not. Much pornography involves actual crimes, and those viewing it end up engaging and taking pleasure out of another person's abuse and torture. I'd like to go on and read a quote by Laura Jansen, and it states, "Trafficked women and youth are frequently used in porn films. I have interacted with survivors who said they were not only trained for sexual exploitation by being forced to watch porn and imitate it, but they were also made to participate in porn that would be watched later by countless men without the victim's consent." So the two go hand in hand. Pornography fuels human trafficking, and human trafficking fuels pornography. Now I would like to show you another short clip called "Porn Used to Train Trafficked Girls, Seen from Trade of Innocence." So let's go ahead and see the correlation between pornography and human trafficking and how people are using pornography to train traffic victims.
I was 10 years old. My little sister was 5. My mother died a few years earlier. My father and brothers work in the field all day. Life was very hard. We had little to eat. One day, a man from our village promised to take us to a special treat, but instead he sold my sister and I into a brothel far to the south, and we never came back. We were locked in a dark room, told we would have no food or drink unless we learned how to please a man. They made us watch pornography. We were forced to watch other children who had been in the brothel longer than us, so we knew what to do and how to do it. My little sister did not survive, but she suffers no more. I have nightmares sometimes. I'm afraid until I wake up in my new home with my new family, and I know I'm safe.
And shouldn't we remember the golden rule, the principle of treating others as we would like to be treated? An enormous portion of the pornography that is being created now is involving traffic victims. We can just do the math here. Many times when people are consuming pornography without even knowing it, people are watching traffic victims that are being forced, that are being abused in these different ways. Now I'd like to take a look at another short video clip titled "Sex Trafficking, Kansas City." And while you're watching this, I'd like you to keep in mind that this little girl that was trafficked was put into pornography. Things were videotaped and filmed, and then people were consuming this pornography. This child, she's someone's daughter, she's someone's sister, someone's future wife. And all of the people in pornography, it's the same thing. They are people with hearts, with futures, with emotions. Let's take a look at this video.
I'm Mary Oker, and I'm a member of Westside Family Church, and I've been involved with a group called Casey Street Hope. One of the common types that is used for recruiting is what's called the older boyfriend. So there may be a girl who is befriended by a boy or a young man who is maybe in his early 20s and she's only in high school, and he may shower her with affection and gifts and persuade her in thinking that they're having a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, when he may in fact be a trafficker or working for a trafficker, and the intention really is not to have a relationship with her but to get her engaged in this, for them, a business.
I'm working with a young girl who's almost 19 now, but when she was 12, she was hanging out at one of our local malls in the greater Kansas City area. And she was with 3 other friends. The parents dropped them off, and these 4 12-year-old girls are hanging out at the mall. And a couple older guys, nicely dressed, real kind, talking to them, start hanging out with them. And one of the guys in particular had an interest in this girl and pulled her aside and said, "Oh, you're so pretty, you're so strikingly funny, you make me laugh." He basically told this little girl everything any 12-year-old would want to hear. The long story short is it progressed to the point to where she started falling in love with this guy, and that's what's called Romeo pimping. So these younger, vulnerable girls will meet this older guy that they think is going to be a boyfriend. He kind of becomes a boyfriend. In this girl's situation, he got to know everything about her family but never met her. So this girl had a mom and a dad at home and a younger sister, a few years younger than she was. She was active in school, active in student organizations. She played sports. She was a straight-A student. And this guy found the vulnerability in her life and began to play on that vulnerability. All of us, even adults, have a vulnerability, some area of weakness. And these guys are master manipulators at finding what that area of weakness is. And they go after it. And he was just relentless and relentless, and finally got this girl to the point to where she was so in love with this guy, she's really did anything for him. Then he turned on her, and instead of being the nice older boyfriend, all of a sudden he was incredibly vicious. And I mean, he raped her brutally and videotaped and photographed the entire event. Within half an hour, was advertising her online, and his phone was ringing off the hook because she was fresh and brand new. And for the next several years, from the time she was 12 until she was 17, she was sold between 11 different pimps in the greater Kansas City area. And it all started with a very simple process of she was just hanging out at the mall and met a nicer older guy.
And many people will argue, well, a lot of the people that go into the porn industry, they really want to be there. They really enjoy their job. But what we're finding from the statistics and from the people that we're talking to, this isn't really quite the case. Some people do, they go voluntarily into this industry, but then they suffer from physical injuries, psychological problems, emotional issues, destroyed relationships. Some of them can't have kids. Just a lot of destruction to their lives, and a lot of them just wish they never got into this industry to start with. And do we really want to, as humans, to sow into the destruction of people's lives? I personally wouldn't want that to happen to my life, and I wouldn't want it to happen to someone else's life. And another component is that a lot of times these people who voluntarily into the pornography industry, they say, okay, they'll sign a contract and say, I will do X, Y, and Z, but these other things I refuse to do. And many times they're drugged and coerced into doing the things that they refuse to do. And whenever that line is crossed, we know that trafficking occurs. So more often than not, we're seeing quite a bit of trafficking with even the porn industry, people that voluntarily go into the porn industry. So now I'm going to show another short video clip, and it's called Is Prostitution a Choice? And it's showing a little more of the reality of the fact that many of the people that are going into this, it's really not a choice. There's a lot of issues going on. A lot of the people that are going into it are at a social disadvantage. There's prior abuse. Let's take a look at this video now.
Most of us today have heard stories of the millions of women and children forced into prostitution through human trafficking. We're aware and we're grieved. But what about those women in prostitution who weren't trafficked? Did those women willfully choose prostitution? And are they as empowered, independent, and sexually liberated as many would have us believe? What we've come to see through years of research and thousands of conversations with prostituted women across the world is a very different picture of prostitution. And the truth of this picture is that prostitution can be more accurately described as the choice of those with the fewest choices. See, nearly without fail, women enter prostitution from a position of vulnerability. Many women, quote unquote, choose prostitution as underage children, some as young as 12. This so-called choice is often heavily influenced by prior sexual abuse. It is influenced by the unrelenting messages from the media, pop culture, and society that communicate that a woman's primary value is her sex appeal. Many prostituted women and children come from families broken by poverty, addiction, and mental illness. Many are homeless, orphaned, refugees, or suffer some form of social disadvantage. One formerly prostituted woman wrote about the sentiment of choosing prostitution. She said, "When I think about my choices, they were simply these: have men on and inside you, or continue to suffer homelessness and hunger. Take your pick. Make your choice." Prostitution preys upon the most vulnerable in our society, coercing individuals through life circumstances to trade sex for the hope of a better life, or even to simply survive. If this is the truth of prostitution, then prostitution is not a choice. If we truly care about the dignity, safety, and empowerment of women and children, then we must fight for a world without prostitution. We must fight for a world where our most vulnerable are offered real choices.
Some people argue, well, you know what? I just look at free pornography. I am not sewing into this. I'm not giving any money to the traffickers. But the way that internet pornography works, the way that advertisements work, anytime people are clicking on one of these sites, they're supporting the websites and they're supporting the traffickers and keeping these people in chains. So there's really no way to go around it. Anytime someone is consuming pornography in any form, it's helping to fuel human trafficking. So I want to offer some practical tips as we're ending here. If you have never watched pornography before, I really encourage you not to start, and I encourage you to encourage others to do the same. I really want to spare people from these problems that are so evident, that are so pervasive in society right now. And many times people will get hooked after the first time they're viewing pornography. And if you've been exposed to pornography and are tempted by it, I really encourage you to run away, talk to someone, turn to the Lord, even get a book. I have written a book on this matter about helping people get out of pornography and addictions. I've interviewed 10, 15 people, and they give their stories, their practical strategies, their advice. What do they do in temptations? And a lot of times it's really their personal relationship with God that helped them to overcome. So I would encourage you to do something to overcome this addiction, because the longer someone stays in it, the worse that it gets. And really, I've seen, talking to different people, looking at statistics, it is like a drug. It's very difficult to get out of this addiction, but I've seen so much recovery, so much healing when people have truly turned to the Lord with their whole heart. That is what my book is really about, finding freedom and help through Jesus. So I really encourage you to take a look at that if you have an issue with pornography or if you know somebody who has an issue with it. In society today, I'm sure wherever you are, wherever you've been, people around you will generally say, there's nothing wrong with pornography. It's cool, it's fun, it's not hurting anyone. But this is not the case. And if you don't believe me, I would encourage you to study this out, research for yourself. But right now, we can choose to stand apart from the majority of society and do things to help ourselves, to help our futures, to better our futures and the lives of others by simply saying no to pornography. I've spoken to many people in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s that have been addicted to pornography. And because they chose not to get out of it, they are struggling so much in life. They've lost marriages, lost jobs, have had so many different things, even contracted STDs. And a lot of them, the sad thing is that many of them said, I wish someone told me when I was young, I wish someone told me the impact that pornography would have on my life. If I did hear this, I would turn away from it. I would have done something so it didn't bring so much destruction on my life. Well, it doesn't matter how old you are, it's never too late to turn away from this. And it's always important to share with children and others about the destructions of pornography. So I care about you, I care about your futures, and I encourage you to turn to the Lord. He is the healer and the source of our deliverance with this issue and others. God bless you, and thank you for listening.